Hello and welcome. I'm Olga Hannanen, and this is Academia Experience. I'm a researcher at the University of Eastern Finland, and I always wanted to popularize science. Knowledge needs to be shared, not buried inside academia. So in Academia Experience, we discuss topical academic phenomena in everyday language to make it more approachable and understandable for everyone. Welcome aboard. Today at Academia Experience, we talk about digital nomad visas to better understand what they are. My guest today is Jan Bednorz, a junior research fellow from the University of Tartu, who studies economics and policy side of digital nomadism. Before we start, it's important to clarify what we understand under digital nomad and digital nomad visas. So the term digital nomad describes highly mobile professionals who perform their work anywhere in the world utilizing digital technologies. And the digital nomad visa is a collective category for a residence permit for these mobile professionals and remote workers that are employed somewhere else other than in the destination country and have sufficient funds to stay in the destination. So, Jan, please tell us, why is it important to study digital nomad visas?
Well, I think digital nomadism in itself is a very interesting object of studies. Digital nomads can be seen as this extreme representation of several modern trends. For example, increasing mobility, the shift to remote work, increasing precarization of employment and the rise of self-employment and freelancing, and so on. So digital nomad visas show how nation states are responding to these trends and how the growing populations of digital nomads and of remote workers more broadly can trigger attempts from governments to rethink and redesign some well-established policies, for example, in relation to taxation or migration. So overall, digital nomad visas are a very interesting case of how policymakers adjust to the changing working conditions and new emerging lifestyles.
Well, mobile people and digital nomads really make a lot of changes. So how the whole thing started? Estonia is considered to be one of the first countries, or actually the first country to introduce a digital nomad visa. So is it?
It's a funny story. In a way, yes, Estonia was the first nation, the first country to announce a digital nomad visa program. As far as I know, they already started working on this in 2018, and they announced implementation to begin in 2019. However, they officially launched the visa only on the 1st of August 2020, just after the first waves of COVID. And at the same time, in June that year, Barbados announced that it's working on its own digital nomad visa, and they fast-tracked the design and implementation of the program and already activated the visa in the second half of July. So they essentially overtook Estonia by just about a week.
See, so is there any other countries who've been like among the pioneering ones?
Yes, right after Estonia and Barbados, 3 other Caribbean island states also implemented digital nomad visas just within 2 months. So we had this outpour of the first 4 digital nomad visas between July and September 2020, and then we just saw a cascading increase of digital nomad visas across the globe.
I see. Yeah, the geography is really wide from the Caribbean islands to Estonia. We also know that many other European countries, also tropical islands and some countries in Southeast Asia, have launched digital nomad visas. So these are geographically and economically very different countries and regions. So one could assume that they also have different strategies in mind when implementing these digital nomad visa policies. Is that the case?
Yes, indeed, it's true. Looking at those digital nomad visa pioneers, it is quite clear that Estonia tried to reinforce its position as this go-to place for digital entrepreneurs and tech startups. And they implemented the digital nomad visa alongside its well-established e-residency program in this attempt to position Estonia or strengthen its position as this very attractive destination for highly skilled, highly mobile, modern workforce. In the case of the Caribbean islands, the approach seems to be a bit different. They implemented the digital nomad visas more to address an urgent problem of decreasing incoming tourists due to COVID lockdowns and restrictions in mobility. And in the longer term, digital nomad visas for destinations like the Caribbean islands can be seen as a way to also diversify their tourist product and attract different new segments of visitors. So we have the tourism angle, we have the digital entrepreneurship angle,
Right.
but there are also some other interesting approaches. For example, in Malta, the digital nomad visa was implemented alongside its residency by investment program. In Malaysia, the digital nomad visa is a part of a broader digitalization strategy. So Malaysia specifically targets nomads who work in the IT sector and the digital domain. So indeed, those approaches vary. And regarding the geography, it is true that digital nomad visas emerge across many regions, from South America to Southern Africa to Southeast Asia. However, we can clearly see by now two regions where the concentration of countries with active or announced digital nomad visas is much higher than elsewhere. And these are the Caribbean and Central American region and the European Mediterranean.
This is very interesting, and these are very different and often contrasting strategies what are behind these digital nomad visas in different countries and regions. So when a country launches and designs a digital nomad visa, can we see a certain unified process in that, or are these processes also vary in different countries?
Yes, besides the differences in purpose and strategic goals, they can also vary in design and implementation processes. For example, the level of engagement or proactiveness can be different. Some countries just essentially legalize digital nomad stays by changing the migration legislation and do little to go beyond that. Some other countries, we can see that they treat digital nomad visas as a more dedicated strategic activity, and they support it with some promotion and marketing efforts, or they offer some supplementary services for digital nomads, or they try to simplify application procedures, which are usually quite complicated for traditional longer term visas. Visas can also differ in terms of the purpose and length of stay. For example, Aruba offers this just 3 months workation option, which is essentially just extended stay with some element of remote work. Some other countries go as far as seeing the digital nomad visa as a way for a long-term residency or even permanent residency. For example, this is the case in Albania or in Thailand, which is offering digital nomads to stay even up to 10 years.
Oh wow, there are a lot of options to choose from. And speaking of which, now the number of countries who offer digital nomad visas keep on growing. And one can find lists and databases with up to 50 countries, I think, that listed there seemingly offering digital nomad visas. But when you have a more precise look, then you can find certain visa options that are listed as digital nomad visas, but they are not quite belong to that category. Like, for example, a freelance visa in Germany or golden card in Taiwan. So what do you think about that?
Yes, it's a very good point. It's interesting to consider what options digital nomads have in the first place. I can see four. The first option is to go for one of the digital nomad visas out there that are specifically targeted at this group. The second option is to choose a country where you can stay visa-free, and this mostly brings to mind the EU. As EU citizen, you can relocate to another country without any hassle and without any bureaucratic obligations. The third option is to use tourist visas or go to a country which offers tourists visa-free tourist stay for a set period of time. These are quasi-legal solutions for nomads, because usually these arrangements specifically forbid working when you stay in a country under this regime. And also digital nomads often kind of stretch the rules a bit by engaging in so-called visa runs. This is, for example, somewhat documented in Bali in Indonesia. So essentially, digital nomads leave the country and come back again to renew their visa and prolong their stay. And then finally, the fourth option, one that you mentioned, are those other visa categories that are not specifically designed for digital nomads, but some digital nomads might fit under these rules. So it's important for digital nomads to consider this as one of the options, but it's also important to keep in mind that you might not meet all the requirements under these visas, because they are not designed for digital nomads.
I see. So when we come and see a list of digital nomad visas, some of these visas are actually this fourth category, other types of visas that can be used by digital nomads but are not the specifically designed digital nomad visa category.
Yes, so when I looked at those lists and databases, I found 56 countries that allegedly offered some sort of digital nomad visa. But when I looked closer and dug into the details, I only qualified 36 of those countries as offering the real, true digital nomad visas, and the rest were either announced but not yet activated, or not explicitly targeted at digital nomads, so those freelance visas or passive income visas.
I see. Yeah, that's important to differentiate, and thanks for clarifying this. So what do you see as the future of digital nomad visas?
Well, I think we're gonna definitely see more and more digital nomad visas emerging in different regions of the world, and I think governments and policymakers might also consider other policy options to attract and maybe retain those highly mobile, highly skilled workforces, and usually with high earnings. It's going to be interesting to see how the policy responses and the competition for digital nomads shape in the future.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and policies are evolving, and countries develop new policies. So it would be interesting to see how what will be there, and how many countries in the end will be offering and designing digital nomad visas. So thank you for sharing your knowledge about digital nomad visas with me and with the audience. And we are looking forward to hear more about your research and future research results.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening. Check out academia experience elsewhere.